The United States Special Envoy to Haiti is stepping down in protest over the, quote, inhumane, large-scale expulsions of Haitian migrants from the southern border. UNICEF workers on the ground are estimating that more than 2 out of every 3 migrants sent back to Haiti are women and children, many under the age of 10. Meanwhile, Border Patrol agents are ramping up efforts to contain the chaos down there. Kenneth Moten is on the scene. He's got the latest from Del Rio, Texas. Hi, Kenneth.
Terry and Kira, we got a chance to go back into that migrant camp and see how it looks. We were there just a few days ago when officials think about 14,000 people were under the Del Rio International Bridge. And here's what we saw this time. We saw a lot of families, people with small children. The numbers have decreased significantly. The numbers are a little under 4,000 right now. And when you think about what it was and what it is now, it's just incredible. But again, we can see more of the families, children sleeping on cardboard or on a thin piece of cloth separating them from the dirt. It is a humanitarian crisis, but it's also a border crisis. And you're also starting to see a lot of political infighting here. And so a lot of big developments that have happened when it comes to the Biden administration. And the fact that they've lost a senior U.S. diplomat, this ambassador, Daniel Foote, who was the diplomat an ambassador to Haiti, who has resigned over the Biden administration's treatment, he says, of those migrants under the Del Rio Bridge. He called sending those migrants back to Haiti inhumane. Already we've heard from the State Department pushing back on those allegations, saying that the ambassador had plenty of times to, in a way that he could be substantive and be able to be part of the solution. But instead here, he decided to resign. So we're seeing that development. We're also seeing officials continue to process those migrants under the border there. They believe that they can get this done by the next day or so and maybe get that bridge open by this weekend or Monday at the latest. But the numbers that we've gotten is 1,400 people, migrants, have been sent and flown back to Haiti on a dozen flights. And even though you have a number of top Democrats on Capitol Hill demanding that the Biden administration stop those mass deportations and stop those deportation flights, we know that DHS has said those flights will continue. They will continue to process those migrants until there's no one left under that bridge. But of course, the border crisis still continues at this moment. And on the Mexico side, we're also seeing a surge of migrants there as well as they retreat back to that area when they go back there across the river because they're afraid to be deported from the U.S. And so that is the latest here in Del Rio. Terry, Kira, back to you.
All right, our Kenneth Moten, appreciate you there in Del Rio, Texas. Thank you. Well, it's no secret that the Biden administration is taking a lot of heat for its handling of the migrant crisis, but it's coming from both sides of the political aisle. Bottom line, Dems and Republicans agree that the president needs to do better on explaining what he's doing and what his plans are on immigration. Joining us now, someone who knows border challenges firsthand, former acting DHS Secretary Chad Wolf. Chad, good to see you.
No, thanks for having me.
Well, let's start off with getting you on the record here on the Biden administration's use of Title 42. We've been talking a lot about that, the same law used during the Trump administration to refuse asylum based on health concerns during the pandemic. Do you support the administration right now using that same policy to deny these Haitians asylum?
Well, I certainly support Title 42, certainly while we're still in the midst of COVID and you see a number of positivity rates on places south of the border, such as in Mexico, the Northern Triangle, South America, I should say. So when we talk about Title 42, it's important to remember where these folks are coming from. It's not necessarily about vaccination rates here in the U.S. It's those source countries and those home countries of where they're coming from. So I supported it during the Trump administration. I support the full use of it now in the Biden administration. Unfortunately, the Biden DHS, they're selectively using Title 42, which is why they recently lost a court case on Title 42 from the ACLU here over the past week or so.
Secretary, I want to just press you on that. So the judge in that case said that this Title 42, which was a public health measure to prevent the introduction of a dangerous disease into the United States, did not apply for many reasons to the expulsion of families in particular in that case. But he did talk about how there are tens of thousands of people crossing from the southern border every day who are not tested or are not checked, and that in a pandemic, The disease is already here. This was a ruse, in the judge's view, to essentially stop these people from coming across and to deny them their rights under the asylum process to, at the very least, a screening interview on their claims that they were being persecuted. How do you deal with that the courts are now looking at what you did and what the Biden administration has continued to do and saying it's unlawful?
There a little bit, but what I will say is not only the Trump administration, but the Biden administration as well has fought to use Title 42 from a public health perspective, both the CDC under the Trump administration and now the CDC under the Biden administration. I think once the Biden administration started exempting minors and certain families from Title 42, then yes, the court and the judge had a reason to take the action that he did. I think you either have to use Title 42 to its fullest extent, or you don't use it at all, because either the virus and COVID applies equally to families as it does to single adults. And the fact that they were sparsing that and they were exempting some and not others, I think gave the court and the judge an opening to rule against them, which we've seen. And I think that's problematic for DHS, and I think it was the wrong thing to do.
And so I'd like to get your thoughts as well about the special envoy to Haiti resigning today and stating in his letter that given the devastating earthquake there, the political turmoil, the presidential assassination, that they faced this policy sending them back without any kind of hearing or interview, that he said it was inhumane and counterproductive. So what would you like to see happen to these migrants?
So my view is this never should have happened, because what we saw during the Trump administration, we also saw Haitians coming to the southwest border. We saw Cubans. We saw other extracontinentals, is what we call them. These are folks outside of Mexico and outside the Northern Triangle. We saw them increase month after month. But what you must do as DHS is you must take early action. You cannot wait till you see a crisis like we've seen in Del Rio, when you have 14,000 of one nationality showing up at the border. At that point, it's too late. You're in the midst of a crisis, and it's very difficult to get out from under it. What you have to do is you have to address this early on before it gets out of control. So DHS should have taken steps to address this early on, to send a signal to Haitians that it's not okay to come here illegally and cross the border illegally. But now that they're here, they must be processed, they must be evaluated, and they must be returned. The issue with Haitians is that since they speak French, Creole, and another several dialects, it's very hard to place them in a safe third country such as Mexico, Central America, where the predominant language is Spanish. And so that's always been the issue with Haitians themselves. So they've got a mess on their hands. It should have never gotten to this point where you have 14,000 of one nationality coming across that border almost unchecked.
Let's talk about Mexico, Chad. The Biden administration's repeal of the Remain in Mexico program, or MPP. You've talked a lot about this, and that forced migrants to wait on the other side of the border for their asylum hearings in the U.S. Republicans say that repeal is part of the problem. But, Chad, despite it being hugely controversial, if you look at the numbers, and we've got them here up on the screen, encounters at the border continue to go up on your watch as well, despite this program. So do you have any hard evidence it was actually effective, or that the Mexican government would agree to reinstating it?
Well, absolutely. And so MPP was never about illegal apprehensions in the chart that you just showed. The issue with MPP was if individuals are going to cross the border illegally, then you apply a consequence to that instead of this catch and release program that we have today. So our evaluation or effectiveness was what do we do with these individuals once they decide to break the U.S. law? And so in this case, they were sent back to Mexico to wait for their asylum hearing. What we do know is the vast majority of them chose not to stay in Mexico. Where did they go? They went back to their home countries, because their goal was not to wait in Mexico and then be let in for an asylum hearing, which they knew they would not qualify for. And so MPP was very successful. The asylum cooperative agreements were very successful, which stated that if you're from Honduras and you're seeking asylum, then you need to do that in Guatemala, the safe third country next to you, instead of coming all the way to the U.S., going through Guatemala, through Mexico to try to seek asylum. There are other countries in this world that you can apply for and receive asylum from. And so that's what MPP was about, and that was about our asylum cooperative agreements. And guess what? It worked. Some of the illegal apprehension numbers went down, but more importantly, there was a consequence to the illegal behavior. And that's what we don't have now. You see migrants being released back to that failed catch and release policy of yesteryear, and it's back today. And that's why you see over 200,000 illegal apprehensions in a 30-day period over the last 2 months.
There was also a lot of pent-up demand to cross that border, given the pandemic and President Trump, who discouraged people from coming. But let me ask you, about something Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas told Congress. He said that we haven't seen a group gather at the border at this speed before. You were talking about how large this group is. They track migration in Central and South America, and here we are with this situation in Del Rio, Texas. Do you agree with Secretary Mayorkas' assessment about the speed, or do you think there were red flags here?
Well, I'm obviously not privy to the information and the intelligence he has. All I can tell you is while I was acting secretary and spent 4 years at the department, we would receive a lot of intelligence and a lot of information about caravans of groups, and that's what this group was. Caravans of groups coming from Central America through Mexico. This group, the Haitians passed through border control in Mexico on their southern border en masse. And there was press reporting in Mexico about this group. So I have to think the DHS had full awareness of a large group of migrants coming to that border. And why weren't they more proactive in taking actions as we did in 2019 and 2020 pretty effectively with our partners in the government of Mexico to stop large caravans before they ever made it into Central Mexico and up to the northern border. So I have to think the DHS and the secretary had knowledge of this group. How much, I'm not privy to, but I would disagree a little bit with his assessment that it's unprecedented because we saw large caravan numbers back in 2018 and 19.
A challenge for this country across administrations. Former Acting Secretary of Homeland Security, Chad Wolf, thanks for being with us.
All right. Well, thanks for having me.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.